Biden administration is still pushing for the ability to censor dissenting Americans.
Fam, this Biden versus Missouri case is flying deeply under the radar.
Not too long ago, you had the court that ordered the Biden administration to stop their egregious censorship of the American people and forcing social media companies to comply. Fifth Circuit argued that the Biden administration directly violated the First Amendment. And the Biden administration pressuring social media companies to censor Americans because it was critical of their COVID-19 policy and how they was waging war in Ukraine. Despite this being a PR disaster for the Biden administration, they are now pushing this to the Supreme Court. The Biden administration is about to argue in front of the entire country that they have the right to pressure social media companies to censor Americans who criticize the government. Oh, you guys really want to have a conversation? Let's do it. I don't think this is going to go well for the Biden administration. What do you call the merger between corporation and state with the stated goal of crushing dissent against the government? Biden be like, come on, man, give me a break. I just want to do a little bit of fascism. It's not the first time that the Biden administration took an L while trying to roll back your constitutional rights. In a massive violation of our Second and Fourth Amendment rights, the Biden administration urged the Supreme Court to allow the police to enter people's homes and seize their guns without any warrant or probable cause. Hey, shit lives. Who do you guys think this is going to hurt the most?
What's poppin'? What's poppin', my friends, my family? Welcome to Friday RBN Live. We had quite the show for you today. We had quite the day. You guys see I have fun making these videos. I had a lot of fun making the videos. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. We have a great guest joining us for the first time on RBN, Scott Ritter. You guys know I'm a big foreign policy nerd. There's just this little thing going on called the Ukraine war. Just a little bit thing going on. So we're gonna talk about that. CJ will also be joined later. He has some stories he want to break down. So we have an RBN Friday super show for you guys, featuring Nick, CJ, and our amazing guest Scott Ritter, the former UN weapons instructor, who was a victim of this policy. I'm actually interested in getting his thoughts on this. We've been covering this, how the Biden administration is the enemy of not just human rights, but basic freedoms and constitutional rights. That's why it's hilarious whenever we talk about Morning Joe, we show Morning Joe, and they said that Trump want to tear up the Constitution. This is a line that Joe Scarborough like to use. And trust me, guys, you know who we are. We are the post-duopoly leftists. We don't like Republicans or Democrats. Trump, very problematic. Biden, very problematic. But that's why we had to debunk duopolists. You have duopolists that say Trump is an enemy of the Constitution. Can you imagine, fam, how they will react if you had Donald Trump that was fighting to the Supreme Court for the right to censor his political opponents? Do you guys know what they would be saying about him? Everything they said about him. What they told us, they said Donald Trump, the guy, he is so unhinged. He is so uniquely evil compared to every single politician. He will crack down on his political opponents. Said the same people pushing for a censorship regime to cover up the crimes of the Biden administration and the misleadership of the ruling class. So, because our government handled COVID without any real science, because they pretty much did the bidding of Pfizer and Moderna and they had no justification in how they act, because the Biden administration and liberals have no justification for funding neo-Nazis in Ukraine, fam. You know the thing that the BBC, CNN, all the corporate media used to talk about all the time? They talk about the Azov Battalion. Ro Khanna used to warn about funding them. You know the same Azov Banderite neo-Nazis? They burned 80 union workers in Odessa. I was reading about that a few days ago. Like, these people use political violence. They do what Nazis do. Fishes swim. Bears and lions hunt. Nazis do Nazi shit. So you had Zelensky, who ran on the peace platform. You had the neo-Nazis who threatened political violence against him, and many people who would demonstrate for peace, who said we want a friendly relationship with Russia. You had terrorist attacks that was sponsored by Banderites. And because these people were so violent and because they engaged in terrorist activities, you had Congress that even at one point passed a ban on neo-Nazis. Let me show you guys that. I always like to have this right in my if you're gonna have any article, this is one of them articles you want to have on at the go, at your hip. Because you got a lot of NATO leftists who deny the fact that we are funding neo-Nazis, they are Nazi collaborators. But because of the violent extremism of the Banderite Nazis in Ukraine, Congress passed a ban at one point. And Trump lifted the ban. He was part of the movement that lifted the ban on this. Ro used to speak on this as well. CNN used to talk about this. The BBC did a report talking about how there are citizens in Odessa, citizens in eastern Ukraine that mostly speak Russian who favor the Russian state, who want to be independent from Ukraine because they had disdain towards the Nazi fascist elements of Ukraine, because Russians and their citizens had tens of millions that were killed by the Nazis in Russia. They're their mortal enemy. So they wanted to leave after the CIA helped wage a coup against their government. And these things was widely reported on, widely known. Anyone who covered foreign policy knew this as well. That's why no people like Noam Chomsky, who had a lot of recent takes I disagree with, even he was able to get this right, because he's like, bro, I've been paying attention to Ukraine for decades. Like, I've been speaking about the radicalism between the Banderites and how the CIA overthrew the democratically elected government in Ukraine. So people even like Noam Chomsky have been calling this out, because anyone who's been paying attention been knowing about the rise of extremism. So you want to know, in order to hide this up, you had the Biden administration that forced censorship. I got to be careful with the COVID thing, but you guys know how Biden lied about COVID. But we don't talk about COVID on YouTube. It's too dangerous. So you guys know the lies that were told by the establishment regarding the pandemic. And because people was exposing the lies of Fauci and the government and what tyrannical authoritarian states do when they act outside of justice, like they mostly do, they rely on censorship. When you're so wrong, like you are when it comes to the Ukraine war, when you're caught in 4K lying about what caused the war, saying it's an unprovoked war in Ukraine, even though the CIA helped overthrow the Ukrainian government and train neo-Nazis in Ukraine in 2014-15. When you openly lying to this degree, like Biden and the NATO left is doing, you have to rely on censorship. AOC's biggest criticism of Facebook and Instagram is that they don't censor enough. Like, she had this whole thing where she was talking about how Facebook is allowing violent hate speech and misinformation. They're no one concerned. They're no one concerned of the proletariat. The bourgeoisie, of the Democratic Party and establishment, is to censor average working class people, journalists, and anyone speak out against the regime, because they know they're in the wrong. Now, after the Biden administration took a massive L on their ability to suppress free speech, they lost the case between Biden versus Missouri, where a Fifth Circuit judge in court ruled that the Biden administration egregiously violated the First Amendment by pressuring social media companies to crack down on dissent and censor Americans, one of them being Scott Ritter, who we're going to have on very soon, right? So instead of taking that L, you would think the Democrats wouldn't want to talk about this, because it's very damning for them to claim they're the party that fight for democracy, they're the party of liberalism and freedom, right? Meanwhile, they have an administration that got rebuked in devastating fashion regarding their escalating attacks on free speech, was something that the RBN left have been warning about. Our friends, Glenn Greenwald, Heartland Media, Do Dissidents, you can go down the line. We all been warning about the rise of government censorship. Meanwhile, the NATO left, the Bernie left, the progressive sellouts, They were saying that we were fear mongers. What are these concerns about attacks on free speech? Meanwhile, the Supreme Court just affirmed it. Very devastating moment for the Democratic Party. But despite that, the Biden administration is taking this to the Supreme Court. Let me show you guys this tweet. Breaking, the government filed a motion to stay the injunction in Missouri versus Biden. Translation, we're going to the Supreme Court, and I am confident the SCOTUS will concur with the district and appellate court rulings to halt the government's censorship regime. So after this ruling, which was made from the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, and then it was upheld from a Louisiana federal judge, blocked federal agencies from having contact with companies like Facebook, YouTube, and X. And I want you guys to understand the mafia-like techniques that they use. So people are like, what do you mean they forced the social media companies? You had hearings. We had Mark Zuckerberg, all these social media executives that was there that were being yelled at by Democrats. Why aren't you censoring people more? Don't you know there's a rise of hate speech? Even though I don't see anything. It's just the same ordinary internet social media age that we always lived in, where someone says something that you don't like. We're supposed to be adults and know how to deal with it, but we live in a country full of children who can't handle seeing people say stuff that they don't like. So you have people like AOC, who instead of advocating for medical fraud and the wars, stuff that actually socialists and left-wing people should be doing, she does a performance on Facebook talking about how we got to censor Americans. Why the biggest criticism we have of Facebook is that they're not censoring enough. That's their biggest criticism. And that's why they're fighting the court now to allow them to censor people. This is not, and I mentioned before in that video, this is not the first time you had the Biden administration that used the Supreme Court. Now look at this. The U.S. Supreme Court freezes the order curbing Biden administration social media contacts. So as this battle continues in the election, right now the order is paused. So social media company is going to be contacted by the Biden administration really soon. You're going to see a continued escalation of people being banned and censored because of their takes on the Ukraine war, like our guest Scott Ritter. Absolutely unhinged nonsense by the Biden administration. I'm going to show you guys how Biden tried to crack down on Fourth Amendment. We should have Scott Ritter coming in here pretty soon, because it's not the first time they did this. You had the Biden administration at one point, I think it was like around 2 years ago. I reported this on RBN. Thank God for the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court, here it is. This is also what the Biden administration tried to do. And the Supreme Court struck this down 9-0. 9-0. The Biden administration urges Supreme Court to let cops enter homes and seize guns without a warrant. Oh, you guys, the last thing that leftists should do is follow liberals regarding their bullshit having us being disarmed. Now you have liberals and Democrats cheering the ability of cops to seize guns without due process, because in their mind, this is going to target the Proud Boys. This is going to target Trump supporters. But we all know that the gun rights movement started because of the Black Panthers in California. And Ronald Reagan pushed that. So when you have this bill, when you have what Biden tried to push for, because there was a court case that was going on and Biden picked a side. He was urging the Supreme Court to give this power to the police. Who do you guys think this is actually going to hurt? They think it's going to impact Trumpers and MAGA, and it may impact a few. But this will 100% be used to impact poor, working class, especially black and brown people, allowing the police to take people's guns. And now you have Democrats that are pushing to make people who protest Cop City domestic terrorists. If you are against unchecked authoritarianism, and I'm one of the only people who can define what I think authoritarianism means. I think authoritarianism is government and actions that is done without the approval of the people. That is what it is. Yet the Biden administration cracked down on the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, the Fourth Amendment. Who gave Biden the mandate to do this, right? And I see we got our guest in. Scott, give me a thumbs up whenever you're ready. I appreciate you joining me, brother. Actually, I want to introduce my guest, because I think I'll ramble on this story enough. So I appreciate Scott for joining us today. He's a former UN weapons instructor, also an amazing author, activist, foreign policy analyst. Thank you for joining us, Scott. Can you hear us? Thank you for joining us on RBN.
I can hear you fine. Well, I apologize for the connection. I'm using my cell phone because the link I can't get it to go on my computer. I'm one of these old-fashioned Luddites, so get this.
Yeah, I'm glad he was able to make it work. Also, great to meet you as well. The first time we had a conversation. I tend to focus on foreign policy, state violence. That's kind of my role in this network. And I've seen your coverage of the Ukraine war. I think you bring a very interesting, important perspective. While we're just covering now, I don't know if you saw this. You had the Fifth Circuit Court ruled against the Biden administration regarding their push to censor Americans. Now, let me pull up this one here. Now, I want you to explain this more for our audience, because you've been someone who was censored from Twitter and God knows how many other websites because of your position on the Ukraine war. I think we just got you back recently. That's how I was able to invite you on the show. But you had a local court that ruled against the Biden administration, called them out for censoring Americans, and forcing social media companies to do this. Now, after they lost that battle, you have the Biden administration that pushes to the Supreme Court, and now they froze this order because they want to be able to pressure social media companies to crack down on more people like you, Scott. I don't know if you saw the story. What's your reaction to the Biden administration push for censorship overall? And you can explain how they censored you as well. What's your thoughts on the story, Scott? And welcome to RBN once again.
Well, again, thank you very much for having me. Look, let me just start by saying that I hope every American understands how important the constitutional right of free speech is. It is one of the things that separates us, at least in theory, from the rest of the world. When we talk about America being a great nation, it's easy to focus upon the many faults of this country and say that we're not as good as we think we are. That's probably true. But we can get better only if we, the people, have the ability to give voice to our concerns. This is government of the people, by the people, for the people. The Constitution literally begins with the words, "We, the people of the United States." And what makes the people a viable political power is their voice that can be, that has to be spoken, shouted, screamed. I don't care how you do it, but you need to articulate. You need to speak out against the injustices of the world, the injustices of our nations, the imperfections of our nations. You need to articulate your solutions, and you can't do this if you're being suppressed. And one of the things that has happened, throughout our history, but more recently, especially, is the suppression of the voices of we, the people. In this new the age of technology, and as I already indicated, as you can tell by the fact that I'm speaking on my cell phone, I'm not I don't know how to do this stuff great.
I'm horrible at it as well, man. I can relate.
But in this day and age of communication, when I grew up, if you wanted to talk to somebody, you wrote a letter, or you picked up the phone and you dialed the old-fashioned way, one digit at a time on a rotary phone. This concept of digital communications is relatively new.
Yes.
But for for today's generation of youth, it's all they know. They just assume that this is the way it's always been. It hasn't. This creates, a lot of opportunities, because now communication is instantaneous, and so you are able. Today's generation is able to gain access to information at a rate that's just unbelievable. Some people say it's too much, that you get digital overload, etc. That's up to the individual to filter. I call that a personal problem. Meaning
people need a little moderation. People
yeah,
need. I think it's great.
in everything,
Yeah.
you need moderation. I mean, I'm a big fan of getting out, breathing the air, walking the dogs, trying to get some exercise, and unplugging. But the fact is, if you're unplugged, you're not connected today.
That's a good point.
And I'm talking about not just news. I'm talking about just communication. You're behind the ball when it comes to competing with anybody else about anything. You'll find yourself sort of left out. And I bring that up because the way we get news today, the way we get information is different than the past. Again, when I grew up, it was running to the TV at 6:00 and turning on one of 3 channels, and deciding, who you wanted to watch. My family tended towards Walter Cronkite and CBS Evening News. That was a voice we could trust, and we did so. Later on, we get cable TV. The CNN phenomena comes around, and now almost everything is done out by cable. There's so much competition, and it's also on the internet. People get their news through alternative media. You're an alternative media source. You're an important part of this. I'd like to say that I play a part as well. Everybody plays a part who communicates in this way, but we don't control the methodology, the vector. We have to use, for instance, right now you're broadcasting on StreamYard, and then you're going to stream. I don't know what platform you use, if you stream on YouTube or what, but you use a platform. Other people do. There's a lot of options out there. You and I communicated on Twitter, or X as they now call it. I communicate with my family on Facebook. I communicate with a large community on Telegram. I don't control, and the government doesn't control these. These are private entities, but they have taken over such an important means of communicating that you can't view them as private entities anymore. And the Supreme Court of the United States has said that this is one of those gray zones that it has yet to weigh in on. What is free speech? Free speech on a platform like Facebook, like Twitter, like anything else out there. And right now the answer is no. Right now the answer is, because these are private spaces, your free speech isn't protected. The Constitution is quite clear that Congress cannot enact laws that infringe on a free press and free speech. Twitter is not Congress, so Twitter can say, Ritter, we don't want you on anymore, you're banned. But and that should be challenged, because I think that many people agree.
And that would lock. Sorry to interrupt, but there are a lot of conservative states, like Missouri, where I'm from, that are challenging that. And the Supreme Court case is gonna be very interesting, because what the Fifth Circuit ruled was that the Biden administration putting pressure on social media companies to censor people is a violation of First Amendment. But sorry, I want you to continue.
Well, that's what I was getting at. Is there's 2 issues here. There's one just about, can Twitter, having created such a vast and important public space for communication, can Twitter now move in and infringe on this, or does the public interest take over? That Twitter, having created this, has now moved into the realm of what happens there is protected speech. That has to be tested in the Supreme Court still. But what the Fifth Circuit has said is what I and others have said all along, is that when Twitter suppresses people, or when Google suppresses people, Facebook suppresses people, is this really something that they're doing on their own volition, or have they been pressured? And I've always said that when Congress has the ability to summon the head of Google, the head of Facebook, the head of Twitter to a congressional committee and threaten them that Congress will enact laws that interfere with their ability to conduct business if they don't fight disinformation, if they don't fight misinformation, if they don't shut down, Russian trolls if they don't do this, if they don't do that, that is a direct violation of this of the First Amendment, because now Congress is getting an end around. While they're not passing laws, they're threatening to pass laws, and therefore that pressure allows these private entities, or compels these private entities to shut down. And the Fifth Circuit has come out and said that is a violation of the First Amendment. I agree with them 100%. The Biden administration has put direct pressure on on companies to shut down dialogue about. I think in this case that's specifically about the vaccines, about COVID, about preventing discourse about this. And it doesn't matter where you and I come down on vaccines and COVID. It really doesn't. What matters is there are a wide variety of opinions on this matter, and all opinions have a right to be given voice, and you can't shut them down. The Supreme Court has weighed in a long time ago. Louis Brandeis was a Supreme Court justice who, at the end of the First World War, got involved in a lot of free speech issues, and he said that the antidote to hate speech or incorrect speech is more speech, meaning that you don't shut people down, you allow people to speak out, and you trust the average American to receive this information and discern for themselves which argument they choose. That's the beauty of our system, that we have the ability as citizens to decide for ourselves. And this is why I get upset when people talk about misinformation and disinformation. It's as if the government is the only one capable of deciding what misinformation.
So ridiculous.
I'd like to believe that you have a brain. I know I have a brain, and I think that we're pretty capable of listening to an argument, discerning what is fact-based, what is not, and saying this is the better argument. And when the government starts losing its argument, it rather than saying, well, we got to do a better job of communicating, they say we need to shut down the opposition because they're beating us, they're winning. And this is a very dangerous thing for America.
Yeah, I always ask myself, and I always ask my audience to ask themselves, how does a certain rhetoric, how does this serve us? How does it serve us to allow the establishment and politicians and unelected bureaucrats to decide what the truth is? Like, that seems extremely dangerous, right? Especially considering they're the same establishment who lied about every single war and countless other issues, right?
Look, when I was doing the weapons inspection thing back in the 1990s, and then speaking out against the war in the early 2000s, just imagine for a second that, because we didn't have social media platforms back then, so I was getting my word out the old-fashioned way. One TV interview at a time, one article at a time. But today, if I took that same message that I was putting out and put it on Twitter or on Facebook, it would be called misinformation, disinformation. I would be shut down for actually telling the truth about weapons of mass destruction.
Yes.
Because the government disagreed with my voice. And that's the danger. The government does not have a right to tell anybody what they can or they can't say. The government cannot tell us what to think, what is legitimate, what is illegitimate. The government works for us. That's what the people tend to forget. We, the people of the United States of America, government of the people, by the people, for the people. We're the bosses. They work for us. They do not get to make rules that infringe on our rights. We have a duty and responsibility as citizens to speak out and to hold them accountable for things that we disagree with, even if we're wrong. It's possible that we're wrong. I mean, you have friends, I have friends. How many times you sit down in a social environment and you get in a discussion with your friends, you have 5 people talking, you have 5 different points of view. Does that make any of them evil? Not necessarily. It just means that 5 people have a different point of view, and we talk about it. And it's a debate. And at the end of the day, we may walk away saying, they're all wrong, I'm the only one right. Or may walk away and say, hey, they had a pretty good point. I'm going to chew on that for a bit. That civil debate, discussion, and discourse is the building blocks of a viable democracy. We have to have the ability to get together collectively and talk about issues, especially when we disagree. We have to do it civilly, but we're allowed to have debate, discussion, dialogue, disagreements. This is normal. And you can't sit there and say, because you disagree with someone, they no longer have a right to say it, that The fact that they're saying it becomes a danger to society. No, the danger to society is when you shut these people up. That's the danger to society.
Yeah, your mindset is the mindset that we preach on RBN all the time. The government works for us. And isn't it crazy that many people have the exact opposite mindset where they're like, you question the government? I do this because the government tells us to do this. I know the government supposed to answer to us under the ideal system.
Yeah.
And this is why independent media and oppositional voices are very
So
important because you spoke about the overall values of this country. I'm very critical of, but I think it's very important for us to spot out and point out these contradictions, right? Because America as a country has a lot of great ideas, but our job is to point out the contradictions. And what does a tyrannical government does when people do that? They rely on crackdown dissent, like the Biden administration, our government is currently doing now. That's why it's even more absurd that anyone will advocate doing this. Anyone will advocate the government having this kind of power. Because once the government has this kind of power, we all know what they do. They will use that to crack down on disenfranchised communities, workers, and anyone who's anti-war. So it's absolutely absurd. But I want to get your thoughts because we got a lot to talk about because that was a great intro. Because Ukraine, and I think it's one of the most important stories to follow. That and obviously the escalating war with China. I want to get your thoughts on the counteroffensive and one of the reasons why you had Biden administration putting for censorship because you have the corporate media in our country that essentially just repeats whatever the Ukrainian government says, the Ukrainian PR agency, and no one should trust them as far right as you can throw a stick. Like you shouldn't trust these people at all, right? But the U.S. government just repeat whatever they want the Ukraine propaganda machine to say. We've seen the counteroffensive. I've seen numbers where it's around 70,000 Ukrainians have died since the start of the counteroffensive. What's your thoughts on the state of this war and the West continuing to push it despite massive casualties and no possible win in sight from the Ukrainian government? But I just want to get your overall thoughts on the state of the war right now to get started.
Well, I mean, first of all, I think we have to understand, at least from my perspective, that this was a war that was thrust upon Russia. People say, well, Scott, Russia invaded on February 24th, 2022. Russia's the one, the aggressor. I think the history on this is much more complicated and actually favors Russia in the outcome. This is a war that's been pushed on Russia from the very end of the Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union collapsed, NATO had a decision about what to do. It was created to contain Soviet power. Soviet power is finished. One of the agreements made when the Berlin Wall came down, and Germany was going to be unified. There were 500,000 Soviet troops in Germany occupying it from the end of the Second World War. And the Soviets said, Mikhail Gorbachev said, if I pull these guys out, we don't want NATO troops coming in. We need a guarantee that NATO's not going to take advantage of this. And they were promised not 1 inch eastward. NATO would not expand 1 inch eastward. That turned out to be one of the greatest lies of all time. NATO expanded. In 2008, an American ambassador, William Burns, he was the ambassador to Russia. Today, he's the director of the CIA. But in 2008, early 2008, he wrote a memorandum. The title of it was "Niet means Niet." That's Russian for "no means no." And what he was saying is that the Russians have drawn a red line about NATO inviting Ukraine in, that if NATO makes a bid on Ukraine, that this will lead eventually to a Russian military intervention. That's how seriously Russia takes this. So the reason why I bring that up is cause and effect. The ambassador, the American ambassador to Russia, writes a memo that says if NATO invites Ukraine to join, this will lead to a war with Russia. He's saying it straight up, not maybe. He said it will. He wrote that memorandum in early 2008, November 2008. NATO invites Ukraine to join. All right, so what does that tell you? They were gunning for a war from the very beginning. And then 2014, the Maidan revolution or coup, the CIA-backed effort to replace a constitutionally elected government of President Viktor Yanukovych and replace him. And this is where most Americans, it just blows my mind, they don't get it. Replace him with literal Nazis, not maybe Nazis, not part-time Nazis, the full-time Sig Heil, swastika wearing, jackboot, SS worshiping Nazis. And we empowered them, and they came into power. And then a conflict started. Russia could have finished the conflict in 2014, but the West begged Putin not to destroy the Ukrainian army, the Nazis. and Putin agreed. They created the Minsk agreements. And it was supposed to lead to a ceasefire, to Ukraine redoing its constitution so that the Nazis would stop persecuting the Russians. They outlawed the Russian language. They outlawed the Russian. There you go. Look at those beautiful pictures of those freedom.
Look, the freedom fighters, Scott. They're freedom fighters.
Yeah, the American government's paying these people. But the fact is, the Minsk Accords, Putin thought it was a bid for peace. It turns out they were a sham. How do we know they're a sham? Well, the German Chancellor, Angela Merkel, who negotiated them, admits it. We only did it to buy time so NATO could build up the Ukrainian army so it could more effectively fight the Russians. The French president, Francois Hollande, said the same thing. Petro Poroshenko, the Ukrainian president, the same thing. The West was never serious about peace. They always wanted war. And when it was apparent that the Ukrainians were getting ready to make a move on the Donbass, which is a contested region, Russia carried out what's called preemptive self-defense, meaning that you don't have to wait for the guy who has a baseball bat claiming he's going to beat you in the head with it to actually take a swing. If he picks up the bat and walks towards you, you assume that he's going to do what he said he's going to do, so you pop him in the face. So Russia popped Ukraine in the face. So this war was provoked by Russia. It's a war that Russia never really wanted, and they've been trying to end. Again, most people may not realize this, but Russia actively started negotiations within days of the military action.
Yes.
Russia they wanted Ukraine just to agree not to join NATO. That's it. Just don't join NATO. And they got Ukraine to almost within less than a month of the war started to go, and they had a peace treaty initialed, ready to go. But NATO came in. They sent Boris Johnson, the British prime minister at the time, to tell Zelensky, you can't sign this agreement. If you sign this agreement, the West won't support you anymore. So Zelensky withdrew from the agreement. Again, Russia has been seeking to end this conflict from day one in a negotiation that says Ukraine will not be part of NATO. But NATO kept pouring today now $150 billion worth of material, training, financial support into Ukraine, allowing Ukraine to rebuild their army 4 times. Okay, and what does that mean when you say rebuild? It means that the one army was destroyed. So they rebuilt it. That army was destroyed, rebuilt, destroyed. This is the 4th iteration, and it's being destroyed as we speak. The Ukrainians will have to build a 5th. And the thing is, they're running out of men, and the West is running out of weapons, and everybody's running out of money. This is a tragic war. The number of dead on both sides is outrageous. There's talk right now of 400,000 Ukrainian dead, 400,000, 71,000 since this counteroffensive started.
And they want more. I don't know if you saw the story where the United States was critical of the Ukrainian government because they were too casualty averse. They are 100% okay with an entire generation of Ukrainian men being wiped out. For what? But go ahead.
Yeah, Americans should reflect on this. On both fronts, Pacific and European theaters during World War II, we lost 350 some odd thousand dead. I know someone's going to fact check that number and say that's not exactly right. I agree, but it's over 300,000, under 400,000. And that was fighting the Japanese and the Germans on 2 theaters, a world war. The Ukrainians have lost more than that in 600 days of fighting in a geographically limited conflict. It tells you how bloody this fight is. America broke our back in Vietnam with 58,000 dead. The Russians have probably suffered in 600 days somewhere in the vicinity of 50,000 dead. It's a lot of dead. This is a war that's hurting both countries, but it's not going to end unless Russia can't allow this to end, because Russia views Ukraine becoming NATO as an existential threat to its survival. It can't allow this to happen. Just like we couldn't allow, Soviet missiles in Cuba, and we were willing to go to war to get rid of those missiles. I know people are going to write back, well, Scott, what about the Jupiter missiles in Turkey? I agree. It was a more complicated issue. I'm just saying that we couldn't allow that to happen. The Russians couldn't allow the Jupiter. We almost went to war, but we moved those missiles around, got rid of them. Russia can't allow Ukraine to become part of NATO. It can't.
I like to frame it like this. And I want to see if you agree with me, because I frame it like this. Imagine if Russia, China, Iran funded anti-American extremists in Mexico who banned the English language. They had bases all over and funded the most extreme that killed Americans, that was violent extremists. How would America react? Most people would say, of course, America would go to war with them. Not only America would go to war with them, every country would do exactly what Russia is doing, every single one. So if we know that every single country will behave the same way that Russia is doing, why is the criticism placed on Russia? Why isn't the criticism pushed on people that provoked Russia in behaving the way that every single country will behave? Do you agree with that? Because that's how I say it. Like Russia behaving as every other country will behave. So especially as people who live in the United States, the onus should be on us to criticize our government that 100% provoked Russia. Do you agree or disagree with that? What's your thoughts on that?
No, I agree with you. Look, Russia's biggest sin was refusing to roll over and play dead.
Yeah.
You know, in the 1990s, again, I just asked people to go and do the research on this. When the Soviet Union fell, the United States, and together with its European allies and the collective West, went into Russia. And under the pretense of trying to help Russia revive its economy, what we really did is try to hijack the Russian economy, to steal the wealth of Russia out of Russia, enrich ourselves, impoverish a nation, to create conditions that would have the nation break apart. We didn't want democracy. We wanted something that we controlled. We called it democracy, but it wasn't. Boris Yeltsin, this alcoholic leader, was not a democratically elected leader. Yeah, he won a vote, but in 1993, put tanks on the street of Moscow and fired rounds into the parliament, killing parliamentarians because they disagreed with him. How's that democracy? In 1996, we bought the Russian election. We went in there and bought the Russian election. Time magazine bragged about it. The best election money can buy. You know, but the thing about the 90s, it wasn't just about a failed, politics or when they talk about what happened in the 1990s in Russia, the numbers still haven't been calculated, but there are some reports coming out now that speak between 10 and 20 million Russians dying, directly or indirectly, because of the poverty, because of the collapse of society. The suicide rate was beyond belief.
And it's crazy that liberals will cheer that on. They cheered. And
so,
go ahead.
And so that Russia, Boris Yeltsin, near the end of his time in 1999, realized that he had screwed up, that this was and he also realized that he was surrounded by wolves, his family and his associates, who, when he went away, would just jump in and rip Russia apart. And he turned to the one man who wasn't corrupt, the one man who stood apart. And his name was Vladimir Putin. And he said, "I want you to be president." And Putin said, "No, I don't want it." And he said, "Why?" He said, "Because I can't do this job. I'm not ready for this job." And Yeltsin said, "But you got to do it because there's no one else." So Putin was sort of the president, didn't want to be president. And his biggest sin was refusing to become Boris Yeltsin too. What Putin did is, over the course of the next 23 years, is save Russia. He literally saved the nation. And here in America, we resent him for doing this because that's not the trajectory we wanted Russia to go on. We didn't want Russia to stand on its own feet. We didn't want Russia to rebuild its economy, to rebuild its. I just got back from Russia. I spent 26 days in Russia in May. And I have to tell you, well, no nation is perfect, and every nation has problems. If you look hard enough, you will find problems. And I saw problems. I'm not going to pretend there weren't problems in Russia. But what I saw was a nation that was doing pretty good. I saw clean.
That's what I heard as well.
Our
good friend Fiorella in Moscow, she said the same thing. But sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying I can walk 5 minutes from my house. I'll be surrounded by a sea of homeless people. I can go to Clinton Avenue, and there's a black ghetto there that's boarded up, burnt out because cops won't show up there. The fire department won't show up there. The city won't invest into it. That's right here, just literally 5 minutes from my house. We have the worst thing. The infrastructure is collapsing, is crumbling, and all that. I went to Russia. Again, I'm not saying it's perfect, but man, it was clean.
Yeah.
I didn't see homeless in the streets. I didn't see. I got dogs that like to bark, but I didn't.
It's all good. And remember, Scott, that's despite the fact that nobody is sanctioning us. Like, the United States.
It's not like we have the world strangling us. Russia has the whole world sanctioned, and guess what? Their economy. This is the thing that blew my mind. I mean, I knew about it. I mean, I read about it, but to go in, I went to Novosibirsk, which is the third largest city, but it's the fastest growing economy in Russia. It is just thriving. This is a nation that's supposed to be under sanctions. They have so many construction projects, so many companies coming in from around the world. We in the West are so hung up on the fact that of American exceptionalism. We're the best nation in the world.
Yes, God.
And the Europeans are the best continent in the world. Hey, guys, guess what? We are second class. I saw a first class nation called Russia.
God damn it, yes.
And they had everybody coming in. And it saddened me because, you know, some of these businesses were developed with Americans in mind. I went to this, it's called the Academia City outside of Novosibirsk, but it's where they have a business incubator. So if you are a businessman, an entrepreneur with an idea, you can come there, you pitch it to the board. If they accept it, they bring you into the community and they help you build your business. It's an incubator. And there in the headquarters building, they had this restaurant. And it was, I mean, on the walls were all the photographs of American actors. You know, they were playing American pop music in the background. They were serving American style food. They had their brewery right next to them where they're doing their own home brew beer. And they have a festival every summer. It's a brew fest. And I'm like, you know, this is where American microbrewers should be coming here to meet these people, talking about, you know, maybe expanding their business, because these are people who clearly are looking at a business model that is appreciative of American culture and the American approach, and you could replicate it. But there were no Americans there. I was the only American there, and they were adjusting. They were like, well, we'd like Americans to be here, but we're not going to go away. So, you know, we're bringing in the Indians, we're bringing in the Chinese, we're bringing in the Africans, we're bringing in, you know, the rest of the world, and we're going to do business with them because they're good people. They want to do business, and that's the way it is. Russia is booming economically. I wish we were the joke that a lot of Russians told me while I was over there is they said, you know, because they joked about in 1998, me and Joe Biden went at it in a Senate hearing, and so they're like, Scott, you know Joe Biden? And I said, well, not really, but yeah. They go, well, next time you see him, just say for us, thank you, Joe. Thanks, Joe. Because of the sanctions, they're actually doing.
I see. And I mentioned the sanctions part because I always want to highlight how broken and how ridiculous our system is. The United States is the richest country in human history, but we got massive amount of poverty, massive amount of homeless, tens and tens of thousands of Americans die a year because they don't have health care. And this is despite us having a massive amount of wealth and the fact that we have no superpower sanctioning us. Yeah. Right? I don't know how you feel about socialism. I'm a socialist, right? But people who have critiques of socialism, I will ask them, I wish we can see a country implement socialism without sanctions. You have Cuba that lost hundreds of billions of dollars with the Cuban embargo, but their life expectancy is higher than us. They have better education than us. So you have countries that are losing wealth, but they're able to produce results. I'm not saying, like you said, I'm not saying these countries are perfect. I think that's ridiculous to say that. The DPRK, there could be a lot of criticism of that, but the United States sanctioned that country to death. They still feeding their people. So you understand, our country got wealth, no one's sanctioning us, and we still have Skid Row. You guys understand how unbelievably bad that is? But go ahead, Skip, if you want. Scott, you want to chime in?
Say, we're our own worst enemy. We are our own worst enemy, and it doesn't have to be this way, because again, I'm somebody who's been around the world many, many, many times, and I will tell you this: that the world, there was a time when they looked up to America, and the world's not stupid. That's the other thing people need to understand. If you don't think that the world looked at America in the 1960s and saw racism, saw problems, and everything, the world was aware of all of America's problems, but they still believed in the potential of America. They looked at America and they saw a society working, struggling, fighting to make itself better, to improve, to fix the deficiencies. But they liked the potential of America. They liked that America stood for something that they thought they wanted to be part of, that the freedoms and things of that nature. We have thrown away that goodwill. We have thrown it away, and we've done it because
that's a great point.
We don't know how to behave. I mean, imagine if you invited somebody in your house and they just came in, they started immediately telling you, well, that's your refrigerator shouldn't be organized this way. Your pots and pans, no, you can't do this. That's a bad color rug, wrong kind of furniture. And you're like, dude, it's my house. You know, I live here. See, America can't do anything without telling people how they have to live their life.
And then their house is ugly as hell. Like they did that and they got ugly ass rugs. Ugly.
Well, thanks. And I see you see part of my house back there and you just called it ugly as hell. Okay. Thank you.
No, I'm just saying. Imagine if you had, if you had that guy criticizing your house, and then you saw their house was shit. That's what America is.
Yeah, you're looking at it going, well, wait a minute, my rugs are clean.
Yeah,
dog poop.
yeah.
On. You know?
There are a lot of breakdown, a lot to cover while I still have you here, and I'm gonna show this to bring up your point earlier, and this is what a lot of Americans do not understand. A lot of Western brainwashed people don't understand that Putin and Russia did everything they could to prevent this war. And I'll read this quickly and I'll get your reaction, or you can add more to this if you want. But you have President Putin in autumn of 2021 sent a draft treaty. And by the way, this is the NATO chief, Jens Stoltenberg, admitting that NATO is directly responsible for this war. So Putin, this is what he's saying, in the autumn of 2021 sent the draft treaty that they want NATO to sign to promise no more NATO enlargement. And that what he sent us. And that was the precondition for not invading Ukraine. Of course we didn't sign that. So he went to war to prevent NATO, more NATO, and to close his borders. So this is what they will openly admit, the NATO chief admit this. Meanwhile, on the other hand, you will have NATO propagandists that say, oh, NATO expansion has nothing to do with the war. You guys see how the propaganda have it both ways? So this kind of it backs up what we were saying earlier regarding how Putin and Russia wanted to prevent the war, which we all knew to be the case, and NATO wanted to provoke that. One more thing I also want you to, because there's a lot to cover based on what you said earlier. One thing I want to get your opinion on is the Western whitewashing of the Azov Banderite thugs in Ukraine. And I'm gonna show you this video. I broke this video down earlier this week. This person is an English volunteer of Ukraine, a Banderite in her own sense. I don't know if you saw this video. I really hope you haven't, because I want to shock you. This is the messaging that's coming from the Ukrainian forces. Listen to this.
Russia hates the truth that their obsessive focus on a Ukrainian volunteer is simply allowing the light of the Ukrainian nation's honesty to shine brightly. Next week, the teeth of the Russian devils will gnash ever harder, and their rabid mouths will foam in uncontrollable frenzy as the world will see a favorite Kremlin propagandist pay for their crimes. And this puppet of Putin is only the first. Russia's war criminal propagandists will all be hunted down, and justice will be served as we in Ukraine are led on this mission by faith in God, liberty, and complete liberation.
All Russian propaganda.
Russia hates the truth.
Will be hunted down.
Yeah.
Now,
here's the thing. First of all, this is Sarah Ashton Cirillo, I think is the name of the individual. It's a transgendered individual, an American, who is volunteering in the Ukrainian military. We have to understand. The other thing you have to understand is her rank is junior sergeant. That makes her a non-commissioned officer, which means by American law, her passport needs to be revoked and her citizenship revoked. She's not allowed to be doing, but she's doing it anyways. That's, and we'll never hold her to account because of the double standards. But here's the most important thing. Forget that she's an American. Forget anything about her orientation. It doesn't matter. What matters is that the Ukrainian government has a hit list. It's called the Mirotvorets hit list, the peacemaker hit list. That hit list has been around for a while. We'll start with the most disturbing aspect of it. It has nearly 300 children on that list, meaning that any child in the Donbass who has spoken out against the war or in favor of peace has been targeted for assassination by the Ukrainian intelligence service.
That's fucking crazy, man.
Yeah, but then they also have other people on there. And first of all, this isn't a hypothetical list. The Mirotvorets list had, for instance, Daria Dugina, the daughter of Professor Dugin, a Russian philanthropist, Alexander Dugin, not philanthropist, a philosopher. She was killed. She's on the list, and when she died, they put liquidated across her photograph. They bragged about it. They killed her. Tatarsky was a the pseudonym of a Russian military blogger. He was assassinated, blown up in St. Petersburg, liquidated. I'm on that list. I'm one of the top Americans targeted for this. There's a sister structure called the Center for Countering Disinformation, working under the Office of the Presidency of Ukraine. It's paid for, organized, and advised by the State Department. Again, I just want to make sure everybody understands this. Your taxpayer dollars that go to the State Department have funded the State Department working with the Ukrainian government to create a Center for Countering Disinformation that has created a blacklist which contains 78 Americans, and then they rate them as the most dangerous propagandists. I am the #1 most dangerous propagandist on that list. I have been marked for death. So when I see Sarah Ashton Cirillo talking about death, on the one hand, I guess I should be concerned because she's talking about me, but I don't care. I mean, really, people have tried to kill me before. They haven't yet succeeded, so we'll see. But the thing that really irritates me is that the American government isn't saying anything about it because the American government is behind it. This is the American government using the Ukrainian intelligence services to target Americans because we dare speak out against what I consider to be bad American policy in Ukraine. And even though I'm still allowed to speak, you have to understand that there is a chilling impact on this, meaning like just 60 miles away from where I live in the town of Ellenville, there's a Ukrainian nationalist camp where they have monuments to the Banderists. Stepan Bandera, Roman Shushkevich, others are there, and they're heroes monument. And every year they hold rallies, youth rallies. This year they had 2. There's photographs of these kids wearing their Nazi uniforms, holding up pictures of Stepan Bandera, a mass murderer who fought alongside Adolf Hitler to kill 30 to 40,000 Jews, to slaughter 100,000 Poles, 200,000 ethnic Russians. This is not a good guy, but the CIA backed him. We can get into that later. But my point is, they're holding that. They're holding banners with Nazi symbology. They live right here, and so they worship Bandera. The Ukrainian government has made Bandera their national hero. The Ukrainian government wants me dead. And you don't think I'm a little worried that some Banderist thug down there is going to say, well, the U.S. government is not doing anything about this. They're encouraging this. Therefore, they're saying, kill Ritter. And, so it's a little disconcerting. I tell them to get it right the first time because you're not going to get a second chance. But, the point is, that's not how you're supposed to live your life in America. You're not supposed to live in fear of being targeted for assassination for daring to exercise your First Amendment rights. And Congress is doing nothing. I've written my senators, I've written my representative and said, why are you spending U.S. taxpayer dollars to create and set up this organization that calls me an international terrorist and marks me for death, and you're doing nothing about it?
Yes. So while that video could be funny in some way because it kind of looked like an SNL video, right? So even though it could be cringe and funny, I want you guys to know that shit is dead serious. That shit is dead serious because
it's funny.
It's
funny up until the time they put a bomb in my car.
This is our friend Wyatt Reed, who's also on the list.
Yep.
I think Jimmy Dore, Max Blumenthal,
a
few of our other friends of the network is on that list. I saw this right before I got on the stream. My friend Wyatt Reed is on this list of the people that the Ukrainian regime want to kill, essentially, because they are documenting war crimes, documenting what's happening in Ukraine. And I want you guys to never forget what happened is what is happening to Gonzalo Lira. Gonzalo Lira is a victim of the Ukrainian fascist regime who is torturing him. His dad has been talking about this. They captured him, tortured him, and now they got a list of people they want to go after because they told the truth about this war. And the funny thing is, this is not this far from over because you have many liberal Democratic Party sheep, bootlickers, who want to quote unquote end gun violence, right? They want to take your gun because they want to end gun violence. Meanwhile, they're 100% okay with sending weapons to neo-Nazis in Ukraine. And now even Biden, I don't know if you saw this, but even Biden's own DHS is worried about the black market boom that these weapons will create by having the neo-Nazis have them in Ukraine. So not only do you have these people that the Ukrainian government put on a list to kill, A lot of them have people who've been killed. People like Gonzalo Lira being targeted. We're gonna have a black market boom. They're gonna be Nazis with a gun who come back home. Banderite scum like Sarah and her friends are gonna come back in America and enforce the Banderite regime. There are Nazis in South America and Europe that volunteer for the Ukrainian forces. There's gonna be a giant black market boom that will go after people who question the NATO regime. This is something that we need to be 100% concerned about. But any last thoughts on this? I have just a few more things I want to share. Any last thoughts on these Banderites that are essentially threatening violence on anyone who call out the Ukrainian war?
Yeah, look, I take this personally, in addition to being marked for death by the Banderites. My uncle fought in the Second World War in the European theater against Nazi Germany. And we took him to the cemetery in Luxembourg City, where 250 of his comrades joined tens of thousands of Americans who gave their life in that struggle to defeat an odious ideology. And we assumed that it was defeated, but it turns out that the CIA had been funding the Banderists since 1945, all the way up to 1990, and we've been organizing them to take over. The United States is allowing the literal successor of Nazi Germany to reform in Ukraine today. These Nazi thugs, and it sickens me that this is allowed to happen. I just would hope, to show you the hypocrisy of Congress. In 2015, Congress passed an amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act that said no taxpayer money could be used to fund the Azov battalion because it is a Nazi battalion, a Nazi white supremacist organization. So we knew it then. We passed that same amendment all the way up to 2021, and then in 2022. When Republicans dare stand up and say, hey, we're funding Nazis, the same Democrats who supported that amendment back then are saying, there are no Nazis. This is Russian propaganda. There are no Nazis. And then in September of last year, they invited the Azov battalion into the Congress. They allowed them to raise money, to meet with people, to auction off Nazi symbology, the patches with the Nazi symbols. They raised $30,000 in the American Congress. This sickens me, and it should sicken every American. This is not what this country is about. Again, free speech is free speech if they want to come out and articulate what they want, but we don't have to invite them into the people's house, especially when the people that are inviting them know darn well who they're inviting, because they're the ones who sponsored an amendment that said we can't spend our money to fund these people because they are Nazis. But now we suddenly don't want to talk about the Nazi threat.
Yeah, Ro Khanna is the biggest Nazi collaborator. That's what I've been calling him. I wonder if you agree with, because they call people Nazi collaborators who collaborate with Nazis in the 40s. People who had ideological disagreements, that were collaborator. You had ideological disagreements with these people, but you're working with them to accomplish an end goal. You have progressive leftists who are working with neo-Nazis because they got Putin derangement syndrome. And Ro Khanna was one of the people, and you mentioned this in your spiel. That's why I'm bringing this up. Ro Khanna was one of the people that used to warn about neo-Nazis being funded in Ukraine. Even had a tweet he famously deleted about it. This is from his website. Look at the day here, 2018. He allotted them from having this discussion about banning Nazis in Ukraine. He went from that. I don't know if you've seen this clip. This is him essentially apologizing and saying, I don't know how to play the clip, but this is him essentially saying that we got to fund Ukraine to the end, no matter how many Ukrainians die. Like that's he's all in for the Ukraine war, despite the fact that he used to be critical of funding Nazis in Ukraine. That's why I can't call them anything else other than Nazi collaborators. They know exactly what they are doing here. And I'm gonna show you guys this. This is the last thing I'm gonna share on this topic. This is Aaron Mate, who also do great reporting on this. I love his tweet because liberals in the Democrat Party, they will acknowledge who David Duke is, right? But then they will deny Nazis in Ukraine. So this is a great tweet to play on that. He said, David Duke believes his country's mission is to lead the white races of the world in a final crusade against the Semite-led inferior races. Oops, my bad. It was actually the Ukrainian Azov battalion leader that is armed by NATO. He met with Zelensky this last month. So this is the quote that came from the Banderite thugs that Ro Khanna and the NATO left supports now. Their goal is to lead the white races of the world in the final crusade against the Semite people. They wanted to wage war against ethnic Russians in Ukraine because they view Russians as being impure white people that was conquered by the Mongolian people. So anyway, so there's undeniable evidence of Nazis in Ukraine are in our collaboration with them as a country, and you still have progressives who support that, which I take upon myself to call out. Another thing I want your thoughts on. I know I'm gonna keep it for maybe another 10 minutes or so. I appreciate your time today, Scott. Is the unhinged Biden administration? There's a lot cover that we didn't get to, but I want to cover this specifically. Not only do you have the Biden administration who approved cluster bombs to Ukraine, even though they said they wouldn't do that, you now have the Biden administration that is sending depleted uranium to Ukraine, and we use depleted uranium in Iraq, and the cancer rate tripled. We use depleted uranium in Syria, and the cancer rate went up. So, Scott, I need you to explain this to me. How can the United States be claiming they're fighting for the Ukrainian people while they damn their people to generations of cancer and their kids may be blown up by a cluster bomb? So what's your thoughts on the unhinged Biden administration approving these weapons that are war crimes? What's your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, let's be clear with the language. They're not war crimes. There's no international treaty that prohibits that the United States is a signatory to that prohibits the use of cluster munitions, and depleted uranium likewise is not prohibited by international treaty. Having said that, the United States has recognized that cluster munitions with a high dud rate that they have becomes a deadly legacy to generations that follow. That if you use cluster munitions, there's a good chance that children, farmers, innocent civilians are going to pay a price after the conflict because there'll be unexploded munitions. And so we have sought to improve these weapons, and we stopped actually using these weapons because of that threat. So we know that by using this weapon, we create a harm to future generations, and yet we give the Ukrainians unlimited access to these weapons, allowing them to pollute the landscape with unexploded cluster bombs. And I can guarantee you that the price that the children of this region are going to pay in the decades to come will amount to thousands of lives lost and or maimed because of this decision. But remember, we're the United States that had Madeleine Albright look in the camera and say that 500,000 Iraqi children was a price we were willing to pay to get rid of Saddam Hussein. So, yay, America! Depleted uranium, as you pointed out, it's not a radiological threat, meaning it's not gamma radiation, beta radiation. It's a heavy metal toxin, but nonetheless, when it gets in your body, it creates cancer, high levels of cancer. When we use depleted uranium, the penetrator, when it hits, it vaporizes. It turns, and that's part of helps penetrate the armor to get the effect of killing the tank. But when it vaporizes, those particles are released into the atmosphere. They go into the dirt and they get down there. They get into the water you drink. They get into the crops. The air when it doesn't rain, it turns into dust. You breathe it. In Iraq today, if people go look, there's photographs of the deformed children, the children that are born with these. Fortunately, I shouldn't say fortunately, but I mean thankfully for them, many of them die stillborn, meaning that they don't have to suffer, but many of them live, and you can't imagine the life of a severely deformed, retarded, and what that does with their families and the mothers that get cancer as a result. The father, it's horrible. In Kosovo, NATO used depleted uranium rounds, and the level of cancer in the areas where we use these is sky high. But the United States won't admit it. We deny this, but we know what the truth is, and yet we're giving this weapon to the Ukrainians. And fortunately, the good news is these are anti-tank rounds being provided for the M1 Abrams tank, 31 of which are going to be provided to the Ukrainians. I don't believe they're going to have the opportunity to fire too many of these rounds. Hopefully, the Russians kill these tanks quickly, and along with the ammunition that they have. But it doesn't matter. We know that depleted uranium causes long-term health problems for the civilian populations. And so yet what we've done with cluster munitions and depleted uranium is provide something that isn't going to turn the tide of the battle. These are not miracle weapons. They're not going to beat the Russians. It's done for political purposes, so our politicians can look good,
That's a
puff out
great
their
point.
chest, and say we're doing something. And yet, there's going to be families, Ukrainian and Russian families, going forward, whose children are going to be maimed, whose children are going to be deformed because of this. And every American has to reflect on that. This is on us. This is on us collectively. This is our responsibility because it's our government doing this in our name. We're sending the cluster munitions. We're sending the depleted uranium because we're not doing enough to stop this. I know you're speaking out. I speak out. But I'm talking about 320, 330 million Americans who aren't saying a damn thing about this because they don't care. They simply don't care. It's happening over there. It's not happening here. Well, if you live in the city of Flint, Michigan, you know, all the outrage you have about your water, which is justifiable outrage, understand this. The same government that's poisoning your water is poisoning the Ukrainian soil right now. What are you going to do about it? Why are you being silent? Do you want other people to be silent about what's happened to you? You want everybody to speak up in defense of you. So don't be hypocrites. Stand up and
Yes.
speak out in defense of the people that we're poisoning overseas. Everywhere in America, every community that has a problem where we say the government is imposing unjust restrictions or unjust things, polluting our water, polluting our soil, doing things. You cannot be silent as our government does the same thing to other people overseas. We have to be consistent in our outrage about the
Absolutely.
bad policies of the American government.
Yeah, I appreciate your perspective on the weapons, and that's a great point and something I emphasize a lot because they're like a lot of these progressive scumbags, as I consider them. They all support the Ukraine war. I view these people with maximum disdain because they apologize and they adore Joe Biden, the Nord Stream pipeline bomber. They don't care about that, even though they quote unquote environmentalists. So not only do we have 300 plus million people who don't care about war, you got progressives who enable the Democrats who perpetrate these crimes against humanity as well. One last topic, real quick one. I appreciate your time, Scott. I have to ask you about BRICS and the change of the massive shift in geopolitics that's going on right now. Because I mentioned the Ukraine war, obviously something that's extremely important. The rise in the tension between the United States and China is another one. The rise of the BRICS is another giant issue. Not issue, but a giant story that's going on. Obviously, just from the Hill, China-dominated BRICS is a threat to U.S. interests in the Middle East because China did what even the progressives couldn't do and negotiate peace between Saudi Arabia and Iran that is effectively working on ending the genocide in Yemen as a result. You had 6 countries that joined BRICS recently at the most recent BRICS summit. And they had the G7, which was bad for Ukraine because you had the G7 nations that refused to condemn the Ukraine war, and he was furious about that. So you're seeing a shift, and I know we're short on time, so I'll pass to you. I just want your thoughts on this. What do you think about the rise of BRICS? Should Americans be worried about de-dollarization? What's your thoughts about the rise of BRICS? And you can take it from there, Scott.
Well, I think what we're seeing right now is a transformation of the world away from the singularity of America, where we are the global hegemon. We have the rules-based international order that we wrote, that we dictate, that we insist everybody abides by, and the world is saying no. We've sanctioned one too many countries. We've stolen one too many sovereign wealth funds. We've been a bully one too many times, and the world is tired of this. And so what the world is doing is starting to coalesce in multilateral forums, and BRICS is the leading one. It started out as just a 5 nations: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, so-called developing nations that came together to create a counter to the G7 and the G20. The group of 7, the 7 most developed economies in the world. That's a joke now because many of them are collapsing. The group of 20 was the way that the G7 could invite the others, and so we could control them as they developed. BRICS is saying we don't want to do that. We want to be on our own. And for the most part, the West sort of ignored it because it was a theoretical possibility. They just had a summit in South Africa where, as you pointed out, they've invited 6 nations to join. These are substantial nations. Saudi Arabia is joining. The United Arab Emirates is joining. Iran is joining.
Egypt, Argentina is joining as well.
Yeah. So, this is a big deal. And what it means is that when you look at BRICS, it's the way the world's supposed to work, where people sit down and they actually talk to each other. There's no one dictating. Everybody says China dominated. Yes, China is a dominant force because it's a big economy, but it's a consensus-driven organization that that everybody's there willfully. It is stealing the oxygen from the G7 and the G20. I think you're going to see in the years to come that the G20 is going to become very insignificant as the world rallies around, because 6 members join BRICS this year. Next year, when Russia has the chairmanship of BRICS, they're talking about bringing another 10 members. And once this happens, it becomes an unstoppable thing. And the United States is literally left on the outside looking in. De-dollarization is occurring as we speak. This will have an impact on the American economy, on all of our well-being. Am I sad to see that? Of course, I'm sad to see that. I'm an American. I enjoyed the advantages that were accrued by having the global reserve currency. But you have to be responsible when you have this kind of power. And we have been behaving in the most irresponsible way possible. You can't tell people to use the dollar as their reserve currency, and when they entrust you, as the Russians did, with $700 billion worth of assets, then steal it because you have a policy disagreement. You can't seize people's assets because you sanction them. We have abused the role that we assumed at the end of the Second World War, then sought to impose. And the world today is saying, no more, time out, we're moving on. And we're left sort of sitting by ourselves in a playground. Nobody wants to play ball with us anymore.
Well said, Scott. I appreciate your time. It was a great conversation. We could keep going for a while, but I'm gonna let you go. Where can they find you, Scott?
The best way to find me is on scottritterextra.com. It's there that you will be able to access any podcast. For instance, if you send me the link to this, I'll put it up there. I put all the podcasts I'm on, my Substack, any articles I write. It's all there. There's no paywall. You can access everything.
Yeah, for sure. Appreciate you coming on. Make sure you guys check out Scott. Always great foreign policy analysis. Like I said, these are my favorite guests to have on. I'm a big foreign policy nerd, so it's great to have someone with your expertise come on. So I'm gonna put you in the back. Thank you for coming on once again. I'm gonna send you the link to this so you can share it. I would appreciate that as well. I'm gonna send you the link here too. So I appreciate you, Scott. Thank you for coming on. So I think we're gonna do a handoff show today. We got a lot of content for you guys today. I hope you guys enjoyed this conversation with Scott Ritter, someone who was suggested to me quite a few times. It's something that we finally got done. So I greatly enjoyed the conversation. CJ what's popping, brother? I know CJ got.
What's up, Nick? Man, I like sometimes how we do, like you and I, like to take a quote from Cornel West. We're very improvisational. Like we'll flip the time. Why don't you come in the second half? I come in the first half, that type of thing. So today, this is how it's working out. It's kind of Nick and CJ. I guess you can still call it that. He has the first half. I have the second half. That was a great interview. I watched the whole thing. I watched the whole thing from beginning to end. So great interview, Nick. I'll be just talking about a couple of short stories, just Hunter Biden, because that's kind of a big thing, and then getting out of here. But what were you gonna say? Go ahead, sir.
Oh yeah, no, go ahead. I'm gonna pass CJ. I'm gonna get out of here. Because I got most of everything I wanted to cover out of this, and I gotta go run have lunch with some of my brothers. But this is what networks do. We'll do. I'll pass out to CJ. It's a big day for us because CJ about to do some storage for you guys, and also Sabby has Peter Dow on. So Friday is usually always pretty eventful for RBN.
Don't forget. I don't know if you know tonight, Peter Dow.
Yeah.
On RBN, not this channel, but on Sabby Show. On the Sabby Show, so make sure you watch it to listen, because Nick, what I hope some of the, like, what people have to understand, RBN just doesn't do things on the fly. We have strategy, or at least we have strategy. I'm not going to go into detail. And what has happened with the Cornel West campaign, I hope that some of the things that I'm doing is putting pressure to make it better. You get what I'm saying? The critique from the left is to make this better. Even if, let's say, Peter Dow stays on, you think he's going to be slipping up when he got the magnifying glass on him because we got pressure on him? You get what I'm saying? You think the likelihood, like he'll understand he has an eye on him, like all the time, watching him like a hawk. So that's what I'm trying to accomplish, and I hope. So I love how we're able to do this dynamic, Nick, where I can, or you will come in and critique, because it's been this way where you maybe have a stronger critique for something than everybody else, or I have a stronger critique in this case, and then Sabby is having them on. You see that dynamic, that RBN.
Yeah, people need to understand the whole point of RBN.
We're a collective. We're a collective. This is how we're able to operate. Go ahead, Nick. You're kind of
people gotta understand the whole point of RBN, so you guys can hear from different perspectives. The black left, the black socialists, we are not monoliths. We come at things with different tact, different opinions sometimes. There's need, and one thing I think we all can agree on RBN though is that this left that was like afraid of conflict, the left that was overly reliant on civility politics, was extremely ineffective. Like, but again, if the state of the left was strong, if the military-industrial complex and the police state was crushed, if the state of the workers was strong because of civility politics, I'm like, nigga, CJ, come on, man, chill, bro. Nigga, you see, nigga, we don't have to be so stressed about. Nigga, I'll be advocating for it. But this left now where people just avoid problems, and I was guilty of it in some sense in the Bernie campaign, while I would ignore red flags I saw about Bernie. I'm like, come on, no, things gonna be all right. Things gonna be all right, right? No, that shit has failed us spectacularly. So there need to be massive pressure on even someone who I greatly like and respect, like Dr. Cornel West. I never hit that, but I never, like I said on the show, I never endorsed him. Remember I said when we first covered him, never plan on endorsing him. That's not our role. That's not my role. If you want to be one of the people that's on the sidelines with pom poms, yay! Not me. Our role is to drive and put forward an intellectually disciplined left, even if it makes some of the PNCs uncomfortable. PNC left uncomfortable. We're not here.
And that's the thing, Nick.
Anyway, go ahead, CJ.
That's the thing.
Not my last thought, but go ahead, CJ.
Yeah, but that's the thing, Nick. That's why I love how we are assembled. I literally, I'm the guy, like, I literally don't have a heart. I literally don't have a heart, so I don't give a fuck about your, like, you get what I'm saying? Like, there's certain
that's
people
me and Jamie. We the softies out
here. Yeah, we're here.
We need CJ,
like,
guys. We
like,
need CJ and Ron to be the enforcer. We need, and
right,
I don't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry, but
no, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Me and JB, we're softies at heart, bro. Like me and JB, like this whole thing with Dr. Cornel West is tearing me up. Like I fucking hate seeing this. Meanwhile, we need motherfuckers like CJ and Rome. They're like the enforcers of RBN. Like they're the people that. And
then we have.
I didn't cut you off, but go ahead. I see what you said.
We have the queen. We have the queen. The queen bee, Sabby, who is
Sabby's
our professional surgeon. Yeah. She is our professional surgeon. We are flying in, Nick, the best surgeon in the world to pick apart, or I don't know how she's gonna.
Yeah, she's the perfect person to RBN.
Right, but this is the point of RBN. You know what I mean? We have the Bobby Browns. Like me and Rome kind of rotate the role of the Bobby Brown in New Edition. You know what I mean? That crazy one, but you need that crazy one just to keep people on that.
CJ, that's why it always cracks me up. Yeah, that's why it cracks me up when RBN critics always say RBN says this, RBN is that. I'm like, bro, you know how many different opinions are here rolling around on people, and people cannot comprehend that, fam. It breaks their brain to know that RBN is a collective of black working class people that all coming from perspectives that you guys don't like, every single one of them. So then they try to nail down RBN as this, RBN as that. They can't. But anyway, I know this is gonna be a good show. I'm gonna get
it should be a pretty good show. Not gonna be here long, but we won't see me. I don't know if they're gonna see you this weekend. I'm taking off just to hanging with the family, so I won't be here. So that's kind of why I wanted to do this today too, because I'm not gonna be here tomorrow or Sunday for sure. But you'll see both of us
CJ on Monday, because I think the plan right now, because you guys know our schedule always change. We always keeping it evolving at RBN. At least that's what I want, right? Mm-hmm. So the plan is to have Nick and CJ on Monday and Friday. Today was special because I got Scott Ritter. We had schedule conflicts. But generally, we're going to try to have Nick and CJ on Monday and Friday. and then and CJ does his thing on this time slot. I'm gonna have Nick at night, Savvy doing everything. I really love the format of our network right now. I think we offering a lot of different kind of content, a lot of different ways, a lot of different times. So I hope you guys enjoy this handoff. We got a lot to cover today, a lot RBN content I'll be watching, especially the Savvy Peer Down interview as well. So make sure you guys
that's gonna be great.
Check out all the content together. Like CJ explained this before. Like you gotta be subscribed to JB channel to get what JB cover. Like JB has, if you're not subscribed to JB channel, you guys missing it. JB has the most substantive YouTube channel, period. Like most substantive YouTube channel is not even close. Reading theory, talking about state violence. His foreign policy has evolved in an amazing way. Always having underrepresented voices on the channel. If you're not watching the entire RBN network as a whole, like
you have to watch
you're
everybody.
missing a lot. You know what I mean? You're missing a lot. So anyway, that's my last thoughts. I'll pass it to CJ. We got a lot of great. Scott Ritter was one of many. I got a few other guests I'm working on. I like to have conversation with these foreign policy analysts. So you guys expect to see people like our friends like Mr. Winston gonna be back on. Mark Kimberly, I'm trying to bring her back on here very soon. I'm gonna get hold of Wyatt Reed because I show he the Ukrainian government back on threatening his life. So I'm gonna reach out to him very soon. Nico, you guys know a lot of great guests coming on. Make sure you guys check to see if you're subscribed, hit the bell and all that stuff so you don't miss any of them. But anyway, I'll pass you, CJ. Have a good one.
All right. This is going to be very quick. Maybe we'll be here another 30 minutes. I just thought that we can't go another day without covering at least the Hunter Biden indictment, because this is kind of a big deal. It's kind of a big deal for the election. It's kind of a big deal because it's kind of the nail in the coffin sort of thing for Biden's reelection. You see, it's kind of crumbling. And I believe this trial with Hunter Biden, and this is probably just the first trial. He's probably going to get some other charges, but this trial with Hunter Biden will be going on at the same time as the presidential campaign, which is not good for Joe Biden. So he simply has too many negatives. And that's why you see people like David Ignatius, who is the propagandist arm, direct right-hand arm of the ruling class. If he says it, it is, as far as media came out saying Biden shouldn't run, because they see the writing on the wall. Okay, the CNN poll come out. We see that, hey, this is terrible news with the CNN poll. What's happening with the CNN poll this is bad. Then we see down the line, a plea deal with Hunter Biden fell apart, and we know somebody got word that charges are coming. You get word charges are coming. You know that it's in a certain time frame because the statute of limitations, I think, was later on in September. But the statute to refile, I don't know if it's called statute. It was a deadline they had in September. So with all of that, it's too much. We can't have him being impeached. I forgot to mention that. Him being impeached, or the impeachment process or inquiry. He's not actually going to be impeached. Not yet. They haven't said that. But the inquiry. So trying to get more bank records. Trying to put those bank records out in public to see if it's evidence of corruption. Which, I mean, come on. It's Joe Biden. What's the likelihood of you not finding evidence of corruption if you get to his bank accounts? I think there's a very low likelihood that you're not going to find that. So I didn't hear Nick read the super chats. So I'll read the super chats because they're not pertaining to my story, his, just in case he didn't read them. We have a new member. Welcome to the RBN YouTube community. If anyone wants to join, there's a little join button, usually next to the video, but if it's not there, sometimes people say it's not there. If you go to our YouTube channel, it's on there, a join button. You just hit that join button to be a new member. But welcome to Kyle W. And then Fred says $2 super sticker. Thank you for that. Biden 71 super sticker, always showing love to everybody on the left, or a lot of people on the left. Will Russia agree to freezing the conflict? Love RBN. Thanks for bringing Scott on your show. Yeah, Scott, I watched that interview from beginning to end. And I don't typically have time to do that, but luckily today, because I would typically go on at this time, I had the time available, and I wanted Nick to have his interview by himself. Nah, I'm not going to join the interview. I want you to be able to drill down. It's always good to have the one-on-one. When you want to drill down, you have a lot to cover. And I said, I'll come in the second hour. So that's how we did it today. I hope that question, if it was a question for them, I hope that question was answered. But let's now get into this. I think the only story, and I think I'm going to show you a video, though. So I got this story, and I'm going to show you a video. I guess you can call it a segment, 2 segments. I want to show you the story of how they're throwing Kamala Harris under the bus. So I'll get to that in a minute. But first, let's get to this story. And Aaron, you can start it here. Hunter Biden was indicted, I believe, 2 days ago or the day before yesterday. So let's get into it. I want to show a couple of clips, one from Fox News, one from CNN, and one from MSNBC to kind of get what the two sides are talking about, the establishment, the establishment arms are talking about when they're talking about this story. So let's listen to Fox News first, and we'll take it from there.
Joe Biden's problems just got worse. His son Hunter getting indicted on 3 gun charges. It's relying on a federal form 3 years ago while cracked out of his mind. And it's the same firearm that got tossed out in a garbage can, which he then blamed on illegals. If convicted, Hunter could face up to 25 years in the slammer. And prosecutors hint there could be more charges on the way. It's a real head scratcher if you take Joe's word that his son has done nothing wrong.
First of all, my son's done nothing wrong. I trust him. I have faith in him. And in fact,
shouldn't
my
have trusted him,
presidency by
Joe.
making me feel proud of him. And this thing about a gun, I didn't know anything about it. I have great confidence in my son. I love him. And he's on the straight and narrow.
He's
and
making
he has
you
been
look
for
like a
couple
fool
years
now.
And I'm just so proud of him.
Democrats are relieved that Hunter's gun charges don't have anything to do with Joe Biden yet.
We shouldn't take delight in other people's misfortunes, but we have to have a rule of law. And when people commit crimes, then the consequences follow.
The Justice Department charges have nothing to do with the president. Hunter Biden is a private citizen. He is not the president of the United States.
It sounds like
a trombone
appointed by Donald Trump, kept by Joe Biden to investigate his own son, has found that there's no wrongdoing that Joe Biden did. So, great.
Tell that to Fang Fang. Joe Biden's other problem that's not named Hunter is his age. And it looks like Democrats can't avoid that one either.
Well, age is a relative thing, as we all know. Let's be in the very positive vein about age. It is about
as the 83-year-old said,
the president needs to have. Joe Biden knows his why.
The conclusion that people draw is,
I like what Mitt Romney said recently. Now, this could be all made up, what he's saying. He said, I'm retiring because I think he referenced that he's in his 80s. He looks pretty good for an 80-year-old, actually, I got to say. I think he referenced that. If he said 78, but the point was that, hey, I'm too old. I think it's time for some young people to get in here. How the hell do we? Nancy Pelosi, 83. Mitch McConnell, freezing while talking. Joe Biden, dementia, mixing up where he's at, doesn't know where he's at, acting like he was on ground zero on 9/11 when he wasn't. Dianne Feinstein. Like so many, Chuck Grassley. Well, how old is Chuck Grassley? Chuck Schumer is up there. Like, what are we doing? Think about this. What could we possibly benefit? Do you think, is it possible to have a country, a geriatric sort of country that is progressive? Do you think that's possible? I guess it's possible. But is it plausible? I guess is the question. I don't think it's plausible. I mean, we could find a bunch of people. I guess we want to use Bernie Sanders. Let's say we had a bunch of Bernie Sanders. He's decent. So I guess we would need in Congress 535 of them. I guess that would work. But it's an indication that they don't trust. The ruling class doesn't necessarily trust the up and coming to be as staunch as these older people. And maybe that's what it is. But anyway, let's finish watching, and then we continue.
Off base. When people say to me, well, he's old. Yeah, that's right. But look at what he's gotten done.
Nothing.
And then, if that's not enough for you, look
It's not.
at the alternative.
The White House.
That's not enough either.
Media for bringing it up, but they're not going to stop. It's a water cooler issue with Republicans. It just is.
All right, Judge, gun charges. Is this all there is, or is there more to come?
Now, I typically don't use the 5 because although it's one of their most popular shows, if not the most popular show, I know Gutfield, the one on the far right, has a show and it's pretty popular on there. And I know that this show is, and Fox and Friends, but I don't know the order of ranking. But this, to me, sometimes feels very unserious, like the lady on the far right and the guy in the middle. Jesse Waters and the girl on the far left, I should say. I can't take seriously. But today, I did want to use this clip because of the humor. We do want to make it a little more lighter with what's happening with Hunter Biden, because actually, let me leave it there and then play the clip, and then I'll explain later.
There is definitely more to come. First of all, the walls are closing in on Joe Biden right now. The dominoes have started to fall. We talked about this with David Ignatius, the opinion piece in the Washington Post. We knew that it was going to start falling apart. And then we have Nancy Pelosi, who's a very smart woman who is able to say very clearly that, Joe Biden is the greatest, Kamala is the greatest. And instead, she refuses to say that Kamala Harris is the best running mate for Joe Biden. Okay.
So she's referencing the other story I was talking about, and that clip I am going to play. So I'm playing it in a different segment, but I will play that clip, and it goes to my segment of how they're throwing Kamala Harris under the bus. This is a coordinated sort of thing that's happening. It's not a coincidence. The poll, of CNN poll comes out. The charges are dropped on the Washington Post. David Ignatius article comes out. Nancy Pelosi and Rep. Raskin, I'm going to show you that video. Rep. Raskin, literally with Jake Tapper, refusing to say if Kamala Harris was the best running mate for him. And Jake Tapper pushes him on it. So this is not a coincidence. They go from not wanting to say anything bad about Joe Biden, blaming his dementia on stuttering, to now where they're accepting what's going on. Because it's a finally realizing that we need to change here if we want to keep the blue team in power in the White House. And I think they see it slipping away. But let's listen to maybe a few more minutes, and then I'm going to play the next clip on MSNBC.
And then you've got Mika Brzezinski actually saying this morning that this has now become a real serious discussion about Joe's age and his mental acuity. Okay, but now we've got the first time in American history that a president's son has been indicted. He's been indicted.
Yeah, where is her
neck?
Very much
That's a good question. Crime. It is a matter of record, the public record. He has made admissions in the book. 3 counts to this indictment, adding up to 25 years. However, those 25 years, if he were to be convicted of all 3, lying on the form, lying to the person he bought the gun from, and actually possessing the gun while he was under the influence of drugs, the sentences would be run concurrently. That means he's never going to get 25 years. And as a first offender, it's probably not going to be anything, even near the highest charge or the lowest, which is 5 years. However, what is stunning about all this is that there was absolutely nothing preventing this indictment from being issued 5 years ago or 4 years and 11 months ago. The fact that David Weiss now has special prosecutor status hasn't given him any additional powers that he didn't already have, because this indictment is in Delaware, where Hunter lives, where the crime was committed. And David Weiss has always had the power in that particular place. Now, the whistleblowers are the ones who really open this thing up to us, because Joe Biden has been lying, and you actually do get it. It's his son. He loves him.
Now, I watch a lot of the coverage here, and it is sometimes hard to sort of narrow down exactly all of this corruption They're talking about it. They always talk about it in vague terms, meaning when I say vague terms, meaning they just refer to it all holistically as corruption. It's never, or they'll say he's taking money. Like, tell me what that is. And maybe that's what the bank was. Maybe that's what they want to do through the impeachment inquiry, is get the bank statement so they're able to corroborate what they believe in some instances. But it is hard to narrow down some of the critiques they had, or some of the things they're saying about Joe Biden. Now, I can narrow down the corruption that I know of, but what they're saying specifically about China, that's the part that for me so far has been hard to kind of narrow down. But here is the next one. This is CNN. This is supposed to be we're in the middle. That's what they want to project. So we just came from the right perspective on the same story. Now we're going to supposedly the quote unquote middle. This is by ruling class framing that I'm using their terms. So they had to bring in everybody here. When you see them like having huge panels, that means they have a lot of propaganda to sell. You noticed it with the January 6th. 10 people up here talking. That means they have a lot of propaganda to sell. They're making it like a show within the show, like a PowerPoint presentation. But let's listen to what CNN says about Hunter Biden getting indicted.
A historic decision by the Department of Justice. They have filed charges against the son of President Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, 3 different charges, 2 of them related to lying on statements in an effort to buy a firearm. The 3rd charge for actually possessing that firearm as a prohibited person. A reminder, the case being brought by Special Counsel Daniel Weiss is based on Hunter Biden's purchase of this weapon, as he wrote in this form that he was not abusing narcotics, and later in a biography wrote that he did. We have a team of reporters and analysts with us to break down this news. First to Paula Reed. Paula, you're getting some new reporting about what's going on.
Yeah, I've been speaking over the past few days to people in Hunter Biden's camp, and I got the sense that it's just pretty dark and gloomy over there. They feel really defeated. They really thought that they were going to be successful with that plea deal that they had negotiated.
They really thought that good old daddy and his influence, I mean, he's the president. If you can't get an influence from the president, that's what Hunter Biden said. If I can't get my daddy to chime in here, where can I get him to chime in? This is his Justice Department. And they tried to sneak that shit through. Hunter Biden's lawyer in tandem, in conjunction with the DOJ, in all of these charges, Merrick Garland and everything. They thought they were going to sneak past that plea deal. If they had a judge that wasn't, I don't know if she's or the person was ethical or not, but let's say less ethical. I'm not, because I don't want to attribute giving them like they're ethical that they don't deserve, because I don't know. Let's say even less ethical, they would have just let this slide through. But she looked, I think I keep referring to her as a she because I believe it was a female judge, and was like, this seems a little weird. You're trying to get me entangled in this gun charge. How are we wiping away a gun charge for this? And then you're putting me in this, and then it falls through because what came to be and I think we can say with certainty this is what it was. It was an agreement on paper, and then it was the actual agreement that wasn't on paper. That's why it didn't make sense on paper. Because, does this cover everything? That's why it was vague. So that later, that was the cover, of course. Everybody understood that, both sides. But when that was called out, the prosecution was like, he told him, hey, if they find out this plan, I'm going to act like I didn't know anything about it. And that's exactly what the prosecution did. Kind of threw their hands up. And now they're having to sort of being forced to have to prosecute him. Or this is going to look bad for the president. Literally, if they didn't do this, this is going to look bad. And this is probably the first set of charges he's going to have.
Negotiated. Even when it first fell apart, they felt like ultimately the judge would approve it. And when that didn't happen, there was quite a bit of despair because Hunter Biden is facing millions and millions of dollars in legal debt from his various legal issues. And it's very difficult for him to find employment right now or raise money. So these charges today, I am told these came as news to their team. They have not scheduled an initial appearance or how exactly he's going to turn himself in, right? Will he be arrested? Well, typically you arrange a time to turn yourself in. But I've also been asking a lot about his relationship with his father and with the White House. And I'm told by multiple sources that he's actually still very close to his dad. They talk frequently, but they don't talk about this criminal case a lot.
Right. That's what happens. That's what happens.
Yeah, and they shouldn't be talking about it, right?
Right.
Why?
That's also, they should not be talking about.
Why? Your son calls you about an issue he has. It doesn't matter if he did something illegal. He's still your son. You're not going to console him. You're not going to talk about the issue. That's what they think. That's what they think. We believe. They're going to talk about that. Yeah, right. Now, I mean, in general. Now, specifically, maybe he's not talking about it because Joe Biden is incapable because of his cognitive decline. So that could be true in this instance, but let's not, come on. Let's continue.
About this. I want to go to Kayla Tausche at the White House. As you're seeking reaction there, tell us what you're getting.
Well, Brianna, we are hearing from the White House counsel's office, who, as expected, when asked to respond to the news of the indictment today, said that any questions should be referred to the Department of Justice or Hunter's personal representatives, given that this is an independent investigation. That has been the official line from the White House ever since this began. The White House has pointed out the Trump appointment of David Weiss as essentially legitimizing the investigation back when it was expected to result in a plea deal, and also suggested that the 5-year nature of the investigation meant that wherever it was going to end up was going to be done in a way that evaluated all of the facts at hand. Certainly, it has taken a different turn than the White House, than the president had expected. The president was said to be.
Does it feel like between the two coverages we saw on Fox News and this one, it has a more somber feel, doesn't it? It has a feel of almost like mourning. That's the feel I get so far in this reporting. Let's let her finish up, and then I'll move to the MSNBC clip.
Be relieved when this was headed toward a plea deal, and that when the plea deal fell apart, there was quite a bit of uncertainty and frustration that entered the situation. But when I spoke to some people who are close to the White House about, the efforts by Republicans to try to tie the president to the actions of his son, they said, at this point, the only thing the president is guilty of is loving his son and keeping him close, and that aides within the White House know that. They know not to cross the president when it comes to issues involving Hunter, that he remains extremely close, as Paula said, to his father. The two men speak regularly. Hunter is still invited to official White House events. He's invited on the president's plane, on his vacations, and that despite these legal troubles, the president has not been willing to keep Hunter at a distance. And so that is the nature of this relationship behind the scenes at the White House, though there is said to be some frustration that this did not end the way that it was expected to end just a few weeks ago.
Jessica Dean, to Kayla's point there's, of course, a political backdrop to this. The former president is facing 4 trials, right? Mm-hmm. There are allegations on the Hill that Biden, though they presented no public evidence of this, was somehow involved in Hunter Biden's business dealings. So you have Republicans claiming there's a 2-tiered system. You're trying our president in a way you're not trying. But fact is, this is the first time the Justice Department has ever charged the son of a sitting president, and happens to be Joe Biden's son. Do you speak to Democrats who believe that politics intervened here from the other direction, that the DOJ or the special counsel?
These motherfuckers got the audacity. They got the audacity. Did you hear what Jake Tapper, or is that Jake Tapper? Is that Jake Tapper? Or the guy said, whoever that was. I can't remember Jake Tapper. Do you get the feeling that Democrats feel like the charges against Hunter is politically driven. They got some audacity. They got some freaking audacity to ask a question like that after what they've been peddling here. After the fascism from the Democratic Party and the Joe Biden administration were going after Trump 91 charges. You got some audacity.
Counsel or David Weiss, the prosecutor, felt political pressure that the deal they made and were signed on to was too soft, and therefore they had to go tougher.
Look, I think the DOJ and you all have followed this so closely. DOJ, the Attorney General, have done everything they can to keep this as nonpartisan as possible. They have tried to do that in a hyper-partisan world that we live in. Everything has political implications. This, of course, has political implications for a variety of reasons. You'll remember our polling that just came out. 55% of Americans believe that President Biden acted inappropriately around.
You see why this is so bad for the Biden administration? Regardless if it's true or not, truth has nothing to do in American politics whatsoever. She just told you in their own poll, CNN, and this is a trusted poll. That's why it's devastating. In their own poll, 55% of all people believe that Joe Biden has done something wrong in conjunction with her son. You see how just a trial for Hunter Biden just going to have some spillover, even if it's subconsciously, it's going to have some spillover. But let's, he is the Fredo. Hunter Biden is absolutely the Fredo of the family. And if you don't know, that reference is from the Corleone family of The Godfather, Al Pacino. That was I think he was the older brother, though. Yeah, he was the older brother. That's why he was mad, because they skipped over him becoming the next Godfather and gave it to the younger son, Michael, played by Al Pacino. But anyway, let's get back to let's get down to actually let's go to the MSNBC clip. Since I have it paused here, let's go ahead and just make the transition now to the MSNBC clip to kind of bring this to a close. This segment. We saw what the right wing said. We saw the performance that the CNN put on with that big panel. And now we go to Stephanie Ruhle. She's one of the people on MSNBC I dislike the most, is Stephanie Ruhle. I think it's because I have a residual resentment towards her. She said something about Bernie back when he was doing good in this, I think it was 16 or 2020. Anyway. But anyway, let's listen to Stephanie Ruhle.
We got some big news tonight. A federal grand jury has indicted President Biden's son Hunter on felony gun charges, setting the stage for a possible criminal trial during the 2024 campaign. NBC's Ryan Nobles has the latest on this story.
Tonight, Hunter Biden under criminal indictment and facing the possibility of prison time.
Any comment on the Hunter Biden investigation, sir?
Special counsel David Weiss not commenting today after handing down 3 federal felony gun charges against Hunter Biden for allegedly lying about his drug addiction when he purchased a firearm. 2 of those charges carrying maximum sentences of 10 years in prison. It comes just 2 months after that controversial plea deal fell apart under a judge's scrutiny. Weiss had negotiated an agreement for the president's son to avoid any prison time by going through a pretrial diversion program on the gun charge and pleading guilty to misdemeanor tax charges. Republicans had slammed it as a sweetheart deal for the president's son and blasted Attorney General Merrick Garland for choosing Weiss as the special counsel to investigate Hunter Biden. Tonight, a top Republican told us the gun charges are not enough.
If I ranked those crimes 1 through 12, I would rank this one a distant 12. And ironically, this is the one crime the president's son committed that you can't tie back to the president.
House Republicans have opened an impeachment inquiry to investigate whether President Biden benefited from the foreign business dealings of Hunter Biden and other Biden family members. Though they've presented no direct evidence against President Biden yet, and the White House says their investigation has been a bust. Meanwhile, tonight, one of the 2 IRS whistleblowers to testify to Congress that Hunter Biden was given preferential treatment during the tax investigation is speaking out to NBC News.
I'm a 38-year-old gay man. My politics are simple. I am a Democrat.
Joe Ziegler telling NBC's Tom Winter that Weiss was not the right choice for special counsel.
Did there come a point where there were witnesses that you wanted to interview that prosecutors said, we don't think that's a good idea?
Yes, there were multiple witnesses.
This is a Democrat.
We wanted to go interview and we were shot down.
Come on, Dan. There's also news in the Georgia election case tonight. The judge has rejected DA Fani Willis's request to try all 19 defendants together. No surprise, Donald Trump and 16
They do this a lot. Morning Joe does this very, very often. If they have any bad news about Joe Biden, immediately, like without, oh, we're switching a different segment. They just quickly start, and they switch to talking about Trump. It's a way of saying tit for tat. It's a way of saying, I show you bad shit. I show you, you show his bad shit. I show his bad shit. Like that's what you do. It's kind of to level the bad news, to always serve bad news about your own team with bad news about the other team. That's sort of like what they do. But anyway, let me see. I don't think she comes back.
Will not be going to trial in October when Ken Chesebro and Sidney Powell do. They are set to be tried on October 23rd.
Now, you ask yourself, what does that have to do with the gun charge? They have good editors over at MSNBC. Why would they edit that out? That had nothing to do with the topic. That was literally 10 seconds. Why do they need to do that? So let's get to the article now. So here is the article. Right here. See if there's any information in the article that we didn't glean from the three videos here. This is from Politico. Hunter Biden indicted on gun charges. Let's read a little bit. A Delaware grand jury charged the president's son with illegally owning a gun as a drug user. Now, let me just pause here. If we had, Second Amendment rights to own a gun, but they brought up all of these caveats to that. You got to have this, you got to have that. If you have the right to own a gun, what does using drugs have to do with it? That's the question you would ask. This is a philosophical question you would ask. Here's a super chat here. Criminalizing gun ownership is unconstitutional. That's DC. Thank you for the super chat, DC. Okay, I had something reminding me. Sorry, so I had to turn the sound off. It was given an address. All right, so now I'm back with my sound is back. All right, so let's read a little bit of this article here. President Joe Biden's son is under indictment on Thursday. So it was yesterday, not 2 days ago. I misspoke earlier. On Thursday, a Delaware grand jury indicted Hunter Biden on 3 gun-related charges, including illegally owning a firearm as a drug user and lying on a form when he allegedly bought the gun. Thursday's move is a major escalation in the Justice Department's probe of Hunter Biden, heightening both his legal jeopardy and his father's political peril. The courtroom fight will play out in tandem with a Republican impeachment inquiry into the president that is scrutinizing his son's business dealings. Now you see, literally this one part right here tells you why they have to get rid of Joe Biden now. Why they, literally this plea deal falling apart and the propaganda not working around Bidenomics. That's literally it's not working. We got to get rid of him. But I continue. The indictment notes that when buying guns, people must fill out a form saying, among other things, that they do not use illegal drugs. In October 2018, the indictment continues. Biden bought a gun. That's Hunter. I should say Hunter bought a gun despite being a drug user. It says he owned a Colt Cobra revolver for about 11 days. From on or about October 12th, 2018, until on or about October 23rd, 2018. If convicted, Biden could face up to 25 years in prison and hundreds of thousands of dollars in fine. However, sentences are often issued below the maximum length allowed, and some defendants don't face jail time, which we know he won't face any jail time. We already know that, Politico. I know you're throwing that in there to set people up for the fact that this guy's not going to jail. Of course he's not going to jail. There's several different levels of reasons why he's not going to jail. But that's Hunter Biden. That's what's going on with Hunter Biden. That's what's going on with his indictments. I do have a couple of other sort of receipts here. Let me go to Twitter. Oops. All right, so yeah, no, not yet. Here we go. Let's go to Twitter. I think I have one more receipt. Yeah, from Jen Psaki. Let's hear what she says. I think I have one more receipt for this story. Then I'm gonna play you the funny video about Kamala Harris. It's not really a segment. I just want to play you the video. Let's go to bookmarks and Indicted. Right here. And shout out to Ryan for posting this, quote tweeting it. This is what Ryan says. The difference, actually, let me read what she says first, and then you'll understand what Ryan says. Jen Psaki on Hunter Biden's gun indictment, quote, millions of Americans has dealt with family members who have drug addiction, alcohol addiction. This is a heartbroken president in the White House who is worried about his son. And then Ryan Knight, shout out to Ryan Knight, says this. The difference is millions of Americans who have family members struggling with addictions were not the architects of the crime bill, like Joe Biden was, that locked people up for battling addiction. That's the problem. And that's why people I feel like, go in on him, even though he's a drug addict. It's because, look at your father. This is hypocritical. There's millions of people that were locked up because of your father, and he boasted about it for the very same thing that you're going through, Hunter.
I mean, we have to have a rule of law, Mika and Joe. It's such a relief to hear that from people, including when it's about, as you just said, somebody who is very close to the president. I mean, first and foremost, the politics of this are a little hard to predict. But right now you have the president's son, somebody he loves deeply, somebody who has very publicly struggled with drug addiction, now facing these charges, which are serious. And I'll let Andrew do a contemplation of the legality and the process and all of that, which I know a lot of us have questions on. What is tricky to watch here, and what I think we all will be watching, is what do Republicans do with this on the Hill as it relates to their impeachment process baloney efforts, right? We didn't see a lot of that yesterday, a lot of the tying of these charges to their impeachment efforts. If there are additional charges that we see from the Department of Justice that Andrew just alluded to, I suspect they would try to do that. But right now, what we're looking at, and I think on the politics of this, millions of Americans have dealt with family members who have dealt with drug addiction, who've dealt with alcohol addiction, who have dealt with a range of addiction. My bet is right now this is a heartbroken president in the White House who is worried about his son. And we're all watching to see kind of what happens with this. So, Andrew, my question for you. I was going to ask Andrew, because I'm just curious, because we're all trying to figure this out. What happens exactly next year, right? There's a lot of talk, which is important for all.
So there you go. This is a sad story, I guess. And people just really, I mean, I was being sarcastic there, but people really just don't have, they don't have a soft heart for this particular drug addict because of your dad. Your dad put thousands, if not millions, of drug addicts in prison without any sort of pity or anything like that. Now let's move to this quick video I want to show you before I get out of here. It's pretty funny. Some of you may have seen it already. I can go from here. Where is it at? I guess I can go from here. Yeah, I can go from here. Let's just go back and then go to Kamala Harris under the bus. It's funny, boy. This is funny. To me, at least, this is funny. Let's start here. Let's start with a pro Kamala video. So here is the View. And this is the View sort of reacting to some of the critiques of Kamala Harris. Do I have a banner here? Kamala thrown under bus. We'll call it that for now. We can start it here. Aaron, you can start it here. Kamala Harris seems to be getting a lot of people showing that they don't have her back lately. Nancy Pelosi went on and wouldn't say on the Anderson Cooper show on CNN, wouldn't necessarily say she thinks that she's the perfect fit for Joe Biden. Then it was Rep Raskin, the one that just went through the cancer treatment, was getting pinned down. That's the next video I'm going to show you with Jake Tapper. And he refused to answer the question like 4 times. He asked him the question. So, and this is them sort of talking about that topic, about the critiques of her, about the jabs at her, about the people not coming to her defense. Let's listen.
Over the past 5 elections where you've had a Democrat win, they needed the black vote. 91% of African Americans voted for Biden and will continue to vote for Biden if Kamala is his running mate.
Excuse me.
I would be very careful, President Biden, about getting rid of Kamala Harris because we will not support.
Excuse me. We've covered this already. They've already lost support. It's already down to 61% with Kamala. Black folks don't give a fuck about Kamala. Maybe black capitalists like her. We don't give a fuck about Kamala. You already lost enough of the black vote to lose. You're in the 60 percentile. In order for any Democrat to win, I think the minimum they can go is to like 83%. So no, but let's continue. Let's speed through this because I didn't plan this to be as long.
Wait a minute. Hold up. No, your opinion is valid and beautiful and all of that. But when was the last time you saw anybody get rid of a vice?
Nobody does. That's the thing. It's a lot of Washington speculation.
No, it's not something you would do.
If it was Biden and Trump,
if Biden gets rid of Kamala Harris and inserts,
so her Cole would say, ho. What if it's between Biden and Trump and he doesn't have Kamala? That's the question that's being posed. You're saying even with Trump as the opponent, you're not going to come through? That's the question. So let's see how she answers it.
Insert someone else, he will lose the black vote.
Even if it's another black woman like Val.
We're not interchangeable.
But regardless,
we're not interchangeable.
And no one's saying you are. You would vote in an election against Donald Trump and Joe Biden and a black woman. You wouldn't vote.
I think that but
I want to know the answer.
I don't want to white-splain, but you might be underestimating the black community voter.
I don't think I am.
What do you mean underestimating? Why is that even an adjective to use? Why is that not overestimating? In other words, but
you
continue.
would really sit out and elect. You said I was throwing my vote away if I wrote in another Republican.
I don't.
But you're not throwing away your vote by not supporting Biden if he drops.
I'm sorry, y'all. She is not going anywhere. Let's start with that. So this is a lot.
They're trying to bring her back. They're like, hey, wait, you don't know who owns us, right? You know the advertisers. She's being silly, guys. She doesn't mean that. They're all trying to corral her. The Republican, the woman on the far right, she used to be on the Hill. They're all trying to corral her back to her senses because they know who butters their bread. But let's continue to the next clip. I think I want to go to the next clip because I want to speed this up. I want to get out of here. I'm trying to get out of here before it's time for my daughter, because this is the main one that is like, wow. So let's watch this one.
We
right
interviewed
here.
former Speaker Pelosi. Take a listen.
Is
Vice President Kamala Harris the best running mate for this president?
He thinks so, and that's what matters.
Do you think she is the best running mate, though?
She's the vice president of the United States. So
What do you
people say to
mean
me,
he
why isn't
thinks
she
so?
doing this or that? I said, because she's the vice president. That's the job description. You don't do that much.
You don't do
Not exactly a ringing
Wow.
endorsement. Do you think Vice President Kamala Harris is the best running mate for President Biden? And what do you make of Speaker Pelosi's answer there?
I mean, there didn't seem to be anything wrong with that answer.
That's nothing wrong.
Obviously,
You see how they're throwing her under
President
the
Biden,
bus?
Vice President Harris, Speaker Pelosi, for that matter, all of us have been laboring under.
There's nothing wrong with that because I'm going to do the same thing. That's why he's saying there's nothing wrong with that answer. Now, it's funny, the dynamic, because Jake Tapper, this is the only reason you would go after Democrats is for something like this, because he seems to be pushing them on this. But I'll let it play all the way through.
I want to play this clip from Anderson Cooper's show last night where he interviewed former Speaker Pelosi.
I'm still
Take a
here,
listen.
just got my camera off.
Is Vice President Kamala Harris the best running mate for this president?
He thinks so, and that's what matters.
Do you think she is the best running mate, though?
She's the vice president of the United States. So people say to me, well, why isn't she doing this or that? I said, because she's the vice president. That's the job description. You don't do that much.
Not exactly a ringing endorsement. Do you think Vice President Kamala Harris is the best running mate for President Biden? And what do you make of Speaker Pelosi's answer there?
I mean, there didn't seem to be anything wrong with that answer. Obviously, President Biden, Vice President Harris, Speaker Pelosi, for that matter, all of us have been laboring under just a deluge of propaganda, disinformation, and criticism by the MAGA right. This is a rule or ruin faction, which takes the position that if they're not going to be able to control the direction of government, they are going to throw grease in the gears to try to shut everything down. And what we're all dealing with right now is this impending September 30th deadline, because the MAGA right wants to shut down the government.
You are doing what Speaker Pelosi did, which is not answering the question. Do you think Kamala Harris is the best running mate for President Biden?
Is it? Well, obviously, she gave the right answer. That's President Biden's choice. And I think she's an excellent running mate for President Biden. You know, I don't know what more needs to be said about that. Obviously, people are still trying to, you know, throw presidential politics into turmoil. But President Biden and Vice President Harris are running on an excellent record. $1.2 trillion investment in infrastructure, the Inflation Reduction Act, record investment in climate action. We've reduced prescription drug prices. And so there's a very strong policy record to run on there. And I want to resist the tendency to try to trivialize all politics by making it just about personalities.
It's not no one's making it about personalities. I mean, like, it's just a simple question. Do you think Kamala Harris is the best running mate for President Biden? You've said she's excellent. That's farther than Speaker Pelosi went. But do you think she's the best? I'm not trying to throw anything into turmoil. I actually think it's a pretty simple question. Do you think Kamala Harris is the best running mate for President Biden? Yes or no?
I mean, but I don't know what else I can say other than she would be an excellent running mate and an excellent vice president. I don't know whether
you know what he's saying was. You know what he's saying was
going to a convention next summer. It's you know, a year away from now, and we're going to go through that process. So
I mean, you say I don't know why you can say. The answer is you could say yes. You could say yes. I think Kamala Harris is the best vice president and the best running mate for President Biden. That's the answer you could be giving right now. Yes, she is.
So I've not seen any public opinion polling. You know, you might be a stronger vice president running mate than her or me or anybody else. I don't know who else, if you're talking about the polling, but I will tell you as a matter of substance and public policy, she'd be an excellent choice.
Wow.
And she and the president have done an excellent job.
Wow. Do you think she's the right person? Yes. Very simple. 4 times. Now, to Jake Tapper, would love for you to do that when you have Nancy Pelosi on and you ask her why she hasn't brought Medicare to the floor, Medicare for all to the floor for a vote, and ask her that 4 times after she doesn't answer. That would be nice to have you do, not just over the silliness of Kamala Harris, who nobody cares about, at least not in the working class and poor. So we're going to end it there, everybody. Very quick segment. I'm going to be taking... Oh, actually, is there any other receipt here? Let me see if there's any other receipt, actually, for the Kamala Harris story. Okay, he defends her. This is that full video. We don't need to play it since they clipped it. So, all right. So I guess then that is all the videos I have for today. I did see this. This is, maybe I'll cover this later, but this was crazy. Now let me read it. This is the outro video. Jerry Nadler, AOC, and other Democratic Congress members press conference in New York over illegal immigration turns chaotic, with people shouting, "Close the freaking border," and pro-immigrant groups shouting back, saying everyone in the U.S. came from another, let me finish, country, but they have now forgotten and should help immigrants like themselves and their parents and grandparents rather than demonize them. Watch, and this is where we're going to use to go out. I don't see any more
budget to give additional resources to New York and other cities welcoming migrants. Unfortunately, House Republicans seem set on defunding the Department of Homeland Security and shutting down our government. I also led a letter with Immigration Subcommittee Ranking Member Jayapal and over 100 of our colleagues to urge the administration to use all the tools available to them to provide stability to asylum seekers and non-documented immigrants in our communities. The administration has the flexibility to provide faster access to employment authorization documents and to protect families by redesignating Venezuela for temporary protection status. I was proud to join Mr. Espaillat's bipartisan letter regarding this common sense idea. The problems that led to Venezuela's previous resignation in 2021 remain pervasive today. The solutions my colleagues and I are advocating for are squarely within the administration's purview and will benefit us all. Immigrants make America strong, and nowhere is that clearer than right here in New York. In a city that's always changing, the one constant is that people from around the world want to come here to build a better life for themselves, and we're all the better for that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, you want to say something about what's happening here in New York City?
Sorry.
Do you want to understand what's happening here in New York City? The schools of
New York is welcoming countless migrants who set up this center here at the Roosevelt Hotel to process these migrants, to make sure they're fully vaccinated, to make sure to connect them with relatives and send them on their way if they know where they want to go, to give them employment counseling.
You know where they're going on the tour because there are some issues.
I'm sorry?
There are some issues in the schools in New York City.
There are issues in the what?
The schools in New York City.
What about them?
Okay, there's an overload of students, and we need more ESL
Yeah, well, we
teachers.
certainly need more ESL teachers, and we need more help from the federal government, without question.
Okay.
And one of the key things the federal government can do is to provide temporary protected status to Venezuelans who are more than half the migrants, so they can get work permits immediately.
Okay, and can you identify yourself for our audience?
Congressman Gerald Nadler of New York, right here, in fact.
Okay, excellent.